This is why you always say yes to tandoori chicken. In 2012, a high school tutor and her student stayed up so late one night studying that by the time they were done, the buses had stopped running. Without another way home, the student asked if he could stay the night at her place. Reluctantly, she agreed. When they got back to the apartment, she fell asleep on her bed and he fell asleep on a blanket next to her bed on the ground. A few hours later, she wakes up to the boy standing awkwardly in the middle of the room with a very strange look on his face. She asks him, "What's wrong?" He looks at her and says, "I'm really hungry. Let's go get some tandoori chicken." Confused, she says, "It's 2 a.m. Just get a snack in the cupboard." And he grabs her by the arm and he says, "No, we are getting tandoori chicken right now." And he yanks her from the bed. Feeling totally caught off guard by this whole situation, she goes into the hall with the boy, and as soon as the door shuts behind them, she can tell that he is terrified. He looks at her and just says, "I'm not actually hungry. When I woke up, there was someone under your bed."
This is the creepy story about the smell. A family went on a vacation and checked into a cheap hotel. When the family got to the room, they detected a very bad odor. The husband then called down to the front desk and said he wanted to speak to the manager. He explained that the room smelled very bad and that he wanted another one. But the manager said that every room was booked and he couldn't get another one. But he said he would send a maid to come clean the room. After lunch, the family came back to their room and they could still smell the same odor. Again, the father called the front desk, but the manager told the man there was nothing he could do. That night, the kids held their noses trying not to smell the odor. Eventually, they fell asleep though. In the morning, their parents woke them up. Everybody smelled the odor even stronger now. The father decided to get to the bottom of it, and they tore apart the whole room. But when they pulled the top mattress off the bed, they saw there was a big hole in the base of the bed. Everybody looked in it and came face to face with a horrible sight. There was a rotten dead woman's body. They then realized they slept all night just a few inches away from a rotten corpse.
This is why you should never go swimming at 3 a.m. Michael was a young boy who loved swimming. Every day in school he would try to swim in the halls or try to swim in the field but failed terribly. His parents tried telling him that he cannot swim everywhere, but he didn't care. That same night, Michael decided it would be a great idea to go out into the woods to practice his swimming. As he was swimming, he heard a weird noise come from behind him. Without hesitating, he ran as fast as possible. When he finally got home, his mom told him to come watch the news. When he finally sat down and started watching, he was shocked at what he was seeing. The reporter said, "Today at 9 p.m., 4 teenage boys were killed in the forest that Michael was just swimming at." Michael stood up and started crying.
This is why death row prisoners get a last meal. Okay, so we all definitely wondered why people on death row have a final meal. It's like all these people who commit gruesome crimes get rewarded with a final meal. Most people think it's an act of kindness because of the gruesome death that awaits them, whether it be lethal injection or the electrical chair. But the actual reason might blow your mind. This so-called tradition actually started in ancient Greece, where they believed you actually had to feed these criminals, or else they would come back to haunt you as a mean and vengeful hungry ghost. This is actually insane, and I bet all of you never knew this.
This is why you should never use Snapchat. This story took place in 2015 when a young boy and girl were Snapchatting each other late at night. The boy and girl were just sending Snapchats back to each other, making goofy faces and just having a normal conversation. After a while of them sending Snapchats back and forth to each other, the boy realized there was a silhouette in the young girl's window. The young boy then asked the girl, "Hey, I didn't know you had a brother. Does he go to our school?" She replied to the boy saying, "No, I'm actually a single child. Why do you ask?" The boy still saw the outline of the man and told the girl, "Look behind you now. I think somebody's watching you." Right when the young girl turned around, she saw the man staring at her. The young girl screamed as loud as she could and ran straight to her parents' room. When the parents went into the young girl's room, the window was completely shattered and the only thing left was a note on her bed. The note said, "See, this is what happens when you talk to other boys." The man who did this tragedy was never to be found again.
If you're alone right now, don't watch this video. In 1999, a man was hunting up in the mountains when all of a sudden a huge blizzard came out of nowhere. He didn't have time to make it back to his camp, so instead he took refuge in a nearby cabin. He knocked on the door and heard footsteps coming from the inside, but nobody answered. He knocked again, and that's when the door slowly opened and a man's voice said, "Come inside and lay on the couch." He walked in and thanked the man, but he wasn't saying anything. He didn't think anything of it, so he just lied down on the couch. He shut his eyes, but the man wasn't leaving. He was just watching him. He started getting creeped out, but that's when the man started walking closer. He didn't think twice to jump out of the couch and run as fast as he could out of the cabin. What happens next is truly terrifying, like for part 2. This is why you should always lock your doors. Back in 2017, a young woman just woke up to hearing strange noises coming from downstairs. She thought it was her friend, so she called out her name, but didn't get any response. Instead, she heard loud footsteps running up the stairs. She got terrified, so she ran into her closet and crawled up into the attic. She heard the voice of a man yelling at the top of his lungs, banging on all of the doors upstairs. Once he got to the room that she was in, he started to break everything in sight and yelled things like, "I'm gonna kill you." The woman was terrified. She couldn't move a muscle, and the man kept on breaking things and yelling for several hours. After a few hours, when the house got completely silent, she got out of the attic, ran to her phone, and dialed 911. When the police arrived, they saw that the inside of the house was completely trashed. They also began searching for the man, but never found him. If you're alone right now, don't watch this video. Part 2. He didn't think twice to jump off of the couch and run as fast as he could. He ran into the freezing cold forest, not looking back. After about 15 minutes of running, he stumbled across another cabin. He knocked on the door and was greeted by a couple in their late 40s. They brought him in and asked him what he was doing outside in the freezing cold, so he told them about the experience he just had. The couple looked at each other terrified. Then the woman looked at him and said, "The man you're talking about was murdered 4 years ago."
This is why you should always lock your doors. A class was playing a game of Kahoot when they heard a voice on the intercom say, "This is not a drill, go into lockdown." The students huddled in the back of the classroom and then the power went off. Minutes later, the students heard the sound of a man screaming at the top of his lungs, running down the hallway. The lunatic man started banging on the lockers and his screams gradually got louder. He then started banging on the classroom window, yelling, "Open up." He eventually left, and 10 minutes later, a voice on the intercom said a mentally ill person had entered the school and attacked the lady at the front desk. The staff did a sweep of the school and still couldn't find him, so they locked the doors and resumed class. Later that night, one of the janitors went into the utility closet when this happened.
Can you imagine being locked inside your house for your whole life? Caroline's aunt and uncle said she was so ugly that she had to be hidden from the world. If anyone saw her, she'd be taken to the church and burned at the stake. But things are not as they seem. One day, Caroline started asking questions. She wanted to know why the other kids could play outside, but she could only sit and look out from her bedroom window. This made her aunt and uncle very angry. They said, "Can't you see yourself? Don't you understand the sacrifices we've had to make to keep you hidden from the world?" She had been convinced that staying trapped was for her own good, but one day she decided to escape. She used a safety pin to unlock the door and left. However, soon after she made it out, 2 men wearing uniforms started shouting at her. She began running. When she turned a corner, she saw a group of people who pointed at her and screamed, "Monster." Eventually, a priest came and said, "Take her to the church." They dragged Caroline to the church, put her on an altar, and set her on fire. As the fire grew, the priest turned to the crowd and said, "Look at this monster. Look at her hands, only 5 fingers. Look at her face, only 2 eyes, and her teeth a sickening white."
This guy tried to spend the night in the quietest room in the world, but you won't believe what happened to him. The London Quiet Room has special foam on the walls so nothing can be heard. People have been known to go insane within 30 minutes of being there. This YouTuber wanted to see if he could spend the entire night there, which had never been done. After only 5 minutes, he could hear his blood circulation and began feeling nauseous. After an hour, he looked at his watch and couldn't tell if time was speeding up or slowing down. Over an hour in, he began hallucinating and saw a dark creature coming for him from across the room. He blacked out and his friends came running in to rescue him. He had broken the world record, but he's still haunted by the room to this day.
This is why you should never eat Pop Rocks. There was a kid named Jimmy who loved the candy Pop Rocks. He ate them every single day and he loved all the flavors. One day, Jimmy ate a bunch of packs of Pop Rocks and drank a lot of soda. He then told his parents that his stomach hurt, and they said it's because you ate too much candy today. Jimmy then went to his room and the pain got even worse. He then laid down in his bed and tried to sleep the pain away. About 30 minutes later, his parents heard a loud bang coming from his room. They then rushed upstairs and opened the door, and what they saw made them both scream. There was blood all over the room, and Jimmy's body parts were spread out everywhere. They had no idea what happened. They then called doctors and professionals to come over and investigate the scene, and they came to a disturbing conclusion. Because of all the Pop Rocks that Jimmy ate, and mixed with the soda that he drank, it created a reaction in his stomach and caused his body to explode.
Here are 4 signs that you've been mentally abused. Number 1, you apologize all the time, and you even apologize for things that aren't even your fault. Number 2, you always need reassurance. You need to know that they love you because love in your childhood was very rare. Number 3, you used to have mental breakdowns for no apparent reason. Like if someone raises their voice at you, you randomly start crying. Number 4, you never accept compliments. You just don't think they're true because deep down you don't think anyone will ever like you.
This is the creepy story about the blue door. There was a young boy bored sitting at home, and he decided to go for a walk around his house. But before he left, his father said, "Walk where you want, but do not open the blue door." The boy was walking around the house. He was opening and closing doors when he came across the blue door. He looked at it for a few seconds and then refused to open it, listening to his father. The next day, the boy was walking around his house again when he came to the blue door, but this time he heard screaming coming from it. Temptations got the better of him, and he decided to open the door. When he opened the blue door, he saw multiple people tied up, trying to scream for help. He immediately closed the door and ran away. The next day, the young boy decided that he was going to try and help them. He then went back to the blue door, and this time when he opened it, his heart stopped. His dad was standing inside holding an axe. "I warned you about the door," screamed his father, as he cut his son into little pieces.
This is why you should never play hide and seek. A mom decided to play hide and seek with her 2 kids. The mom began counting, ready or not, here I come. She began searching the downstairs kitchen because she knows that they hide there every single time. As she's walking to the kitchen, she starts saying, I wonder where they are. She looks under the table and sees they aren't there, which is kind of odd. She knew they were too scared to go into the basement alone, but she decided to check anyway. They weren't there either. She began to panic. The mom then says, "Jordan, Casey, come out now, mommy's not playing anymore." There was no answer. Panic really begins to set in. She decides to call 911 and reaches an operator. Tells the operator what's wrong, and the operator sends an officer to her house. When the officer arrives, he says, "Don't worry, we will find them." As she's sitting in the living room, she hears giggling and laughing and hears a closet door slam. She sprints upstairs and says, "Jordan, Casey, you worried me sick." She opened the closet door and nobody was there. While all of this is going on, she hears the doorbell ring. She runs downstairs and finds the officer holding Jordan and Casey. The officer says, "They were hiding in the shed out back." Then Jordan looks at mommy and says, "Why were you telling us to stay in the shed?"
Let's create a spooky man for my next story. Clown face paint. A dark, mysterious outfit will work. Let's choose the boots. So many options. Now editing his eyes. Brown or green? Green. Et voila. Let's play with it. Creating a scene.
This is why you should never explore abandoned ships. In 2014, the US Navy decided to decommission one of its oldest ships, so it brought it into port to be broken down for scrap. Before workers were allowed to actually start breaking it down, the foreman had to go on board and take pictures of every room. So late one night, the foreman spends about an hour walking through this abandoned ship with a flashlight, taking about 100 pictures. When he was done, he emailed the pictures to his boss, who quickly wrote back, "Who's the guy with the axe?" The foreman had no idea what he was talking about, but he noticed the boss had attached one of the pictures that he had just sent him. When he opened it, he nearly fainted. There, in the bowels of the ship, poking his head around a corner, was a faceless man wielding an axe. The foreman had spent over an hour in this hallway and never heard or saw this guy. The Navy searched the ship and never found this guy. They also reviewed security footage of the only entrance, and he never entered or left the ship.
This is why everybody is terrified of surgery. There was a man named Chad who had to get surgery on his lungs. He went to the hospital and they started preparing him for surgery. As he laid on the operating table, they gave him a drug to put him to sleep. He then laid there for a minute waiting for it to kick in, but it never did. A minute later, he then heard the doctor say, "Okay, he's under, we could begin." Chad tried to scream and tell them that he was awake, but he couldn't talk. He tried to move and open his eyes, but he couldn't. They then got a knife and began cutting Chad open. Chad felt every single thing they were doing to him, screaming hysterically in his conscience. The surgery is scheduled to last 5 hours, and Chad will feel every second of it. Here's what actually happens during sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is when you feel like you're awake, meaning you could see and hear, but your body's still asleep and unable to move. During this, you may be unable to move or speak for a couple seconds or even a few minutes. Some people also feel pressure on their chest, as if someone was sitting or standing on it. You might even be afraid because of a nightmare that you were having. This usually happens when you're first falling asleep or your body's getting ready to wake up.
Do not watch this video at night. Back in 2015, a man was taking care of his friend's uncle who had dementia. On the first night, he made dinner and called him over to eat, but he didn't hear him say anything. He went to his room to check on him, but the door was locked. He said dinner's ready, but his response was a grunt. He didn't think anything of it, so he walked upstairs to go and sleep in the guest room. On the second night, he made dinner again, so he went to get his friend's uncle. He walked to his room, but this time the door was wide open and he wasn't inside. He didn't really think anything of it, so he just walked upstairs to go to sleep. He turned the lights off, got into bed, and that's when he heard a noise coming from the closet. He quickly stood up, and that's when he screamed in horror. Like for part 2.
This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open. She's like, I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either. Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house. And so he jokingly asks her, you ever see any ghosts walking around your attic? Her face got completely serious, and she's like, you know, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening. So we investigated and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years.
This is why you should always trust your kids. A little girl named Casey grew up in a small town. She didn't have many friends, but she was always hanging out with her mom and dad. While the mom was at work, Casey would spend majority of her time with her dad by just watching TV. This went on for a little while until things started to get odd. Casey one day saw her dad placing knives in the living room. Casey asked, Dad, what are you doing with these knives? And the dad just looked at her and said, don't tell mom. Casey did as she was told and didn't say anything. The mom came home from work and saw the knives in the living room and asked Casey why did she put these knives in the living room. Casey, keeping the promise to her father, says nothing and takes the blame for it. The next day, Casey saw her father placing knives in her bedroom. Casey asked, Dad, what are you doing with these knives? The dad turned and said, shh. The mom busted down the door and said, Casey, what are you doing with these knives? Casey, scared, says, it wasn't me, it was Dad. He's the one who's been doing this. The mom stops and stares at Casey and says, Casey, your dad was murdered 10 years ago.
This is why you should always trust your gut. In the early 1970s, a college student decided to hitchhike his way home after class. A car pulls up, a man offers him a ride, and he climbs in. As soon as the car started moving, the student felt totally uneasy, like something was wrong, but he couldn't quite place it. Without saying anything, he waited till the next time they slowed down and he flung the door open and ran away. 2 years later, he's flicking through TV channels when he comes across this special interview with a death row inmate. And it's just the audio recording, so he hears the interviewer ask the inmate, why did you remove all the door handles inside of your car? The man just goes, well, the first time I tried to kill someone, I picked up a college hitchhiker who got smart at some point and jumped out of my car. So, lesson learned, remove all the door handles. When they showed his picture, the student knew immediately that he was supposed to be the first victim of John Wayne Gacy, aka the killer clown, who had killed over 30 men and boys in his clown room and stuffed them into his basement.
This is why 3 a.m. is so scary. I know everybody knows that 3 a.m. is a scary time. You always see it in scary movies, but have you ever wondered why? It's because 3 a.m. is known as the devil's hour. It is said that during this hour, the veil between our world and the paranormal world is at its thinnest, meaning that ghosts and demons have a much easier time coming to our world at that time. So if you're ever awake at 3 a.m., and you hear a noise in your house, you better get to your room and lock the door.
This is why you shouldn't go for walks in Sweden. In 2008, a Swedish woman went out for an evening stroll with her dog, but never came back. Her husband went looking for her and found her dead next to a lake. The police immediately blamed her husband and sent him to jail. After a few months, the woman's forensic analysis report came back, and it was clear the husband was innocent because there was all this hair and saliva on the woman's body that was not his. It turns out there is a very strange phenomenon that occurs in Sweden in the fall when all of the apples have fallen off of their trees. Those apples ferment, and then hordes of moose eat those apples, becoming drunk and oftentimes very belligerent, like this drunk. The hair and saliva of the killer belong to a drunk Swedish moose.